Do you have to listen to this noise when you ride? Does your chain come off when you try and shift into the big ring? If so, you need to adjust your front derailleur, which fortunately is actually a really simple thing to do. All you need is a crosshead screwdriver and a 5mm Allen key. Then follow these simple steps. All you need, screwdriver won't come out. Sorry. Front indexing in a nutshell, there's two things to remember. Firstly, that the limit screws adjust how far the derailleur can move either out or in, but to actually control the movement of the derailleur, that's all down to cable tension. So limit screws limit the derailleur, but they don't adjust the movement. That is down to cable tension. Firstly, we've got the derailleur clamp bolt here. Now that sets the height and the angle of the derailleur. Once set, that should never move, but it's always worth checking as part of the indexing process to make sure it's in the right place. Then we've got two very important screws, the high-low adjustment screws. Now, essentially these stop the chain coming off or making noise whilst you ride. This inboard one here, that's the L screw, that stops your chain coming off when you shift into the little ring. And then this outboard one here, that's the H screw, and that stops your chain coming off when you shift into the big ring. Then this final thing here, we've got the cable clamp bolt. Now that changes the cable tension in the system, which is how your shifter relates to the derailleur. We've got quite a crude adjustment here by loosening the bolt and then pulling the cable in, but we can do finer tuning. Up here, we've got a barrel adjuster, which means that we can dial in the perfect amount of cable tension. As I said, if your shifting's already been set up correctly, then the height and angle of your derailleur should be already okay. But to check, the derailleur should sit about 2mm above the outer teeth of the outer ring when the chain is on the little ring. So in this case, we need to drop it down a little bit. And we do that just by loosening that screw a touch there. Don't forget, any adjustment you make to the height of the mech will therefore have a knock-on effect on the cable tension, so it'll put your indexing even further out. To get the angle of the mech, the plates should be parallel to the outer chainring. Unlike the height of the derailleur, the angle actually can sometimes move. If you've ever jammed your chain quite violently in there, then it can shift. So it's always worth having a good look at that. So once you're sure of the height and angle, then it's time to turn our attention to the actual indexing. We're going to start with this low limit adjustment screw here. So first things first, put the chain on the little ring and then also on the biggest cog at the back. Then when the chain's in that gear, we need to turn the L screw so that the derailleur is sitting 1mm away from the inboard edge of the chain. So we need to screw it anti-clockwise to move the derailleur inboard and then clockwise to move it outboard. Now what this does is it stops that really annoying noise when you're in your easiest gear and you're climbing, and also it prevents the chain from coming off when you're shifting into the little ring. If when you're turning the L screw here and the derailleur stops moving, that's because in all likelihood you've got too much cable tension. So you can either slacken it off a little bit here, or better still, undo that bolt completely and let the derailleur rest in its natural position, essentially starting from scratch. Next, we need to look at the cable tension, which is, as we've said already, what actually controls the shifting part. So while pedaling, change down a couple of gears at the back and then try and shift into the big ring. Now, if it doesn't go, that means you don't have enough tension in the cable. So you can try and sort that out by using the barrel adjuster up here. So unscrew it until it does change. Or if you don't have enough barrel adjuster to move the cable far enough, then again, loosen that bolt and pull the cable tension in by hand. If it changes, or indeed overshifts, then the next step is to turn our attention to the H screw here, which limits how far out the derailleur can move. So what we need to do is, with a chain on the big ring, change down into your highest gear, and then we need to adjust the outer plate of the derailleur so it sits 1mm away from the outer edge of the chain. There's a bit of a theme going on there, I don't know if you can tell that. We've now set our lower and upper limits, and we need to test it out. So shift back into the little ring and then back into the big ring. If it won't shift back into the big ring, because don't forget we've limited the movement now of the derailleur, then we have too much cable tension in the system. So then it's a case of backing off our barrel adjuster here and allowing the derailleur a little bit more leeway. And don't forget as well to test it out at different gears at the back, because that affects where the chain sits. Now you notice that in our smallest cog at the back and our little ring, there is still a little bit of noise because the chain is rubbing on the derailleur. Now on Shimano, that's just how it is. So they've added a little trim function into the derailleur It's like a half click that allows it to silence it. But if I'm being completely honest, I would never, ever, ever ride in this gear. So it's not really a problem. To sum up, if your chain falls off when you're shifting into your little ring, or it rubs when you're climbing the easiest gear, then you need to tighten the L screw. If you can't change into your big ring, then you need to increase the cable tension by adjusting the barrel adjuster here or the cable clamp bolt there. If, however, the chain comes off when you're shifting into your big ring, then you need to back off the cable tension a touch and then also tighten the H screw. Unfortunately, it doesn't always go smoothly. There is an element of trial and error in sorting out your front indexing, but it also could quite likely be something other than a problem with your mechanicking skills. So here are the most likely causes of problems with your front indexing. First things first, sticky or gritty cables will ruin your shifting. Now you'll feel it because your shifter will be really heavy, but what it also means is that the little spring in the derailleur can't overcome all the grit in the cables, so it struggles to move back down when you shift down. So that'll manifest itself by struggling to shift into your little ring. However, it could also be due to corroded pivots in the mech itself, and that's because they get sticky and then that stops the derailleur moving freely as well. If that's the case, you could try spraying on a solvent-based degreaser and then a lube, but it's quite likely that you'll actually just need to buy a new front derailleur. Sorry about that. Then finally, if both those things are working okay and your shifting's accurate but just slow, then it might be a problem with your chain and your chain rings. Worn drivetrain parts do mean that things slow down in the shifting department. So have a look to see whether your chain needs to be replaced and then also your chain rings. We've got a video showing you how to do that. You can get to it by clicking up there. Finally, it's worth saying that even the very best adjusted gears do have their limits. It's no coincidence why just about every pro cyclist has a little chain catcher down there to stop the chain coming off when they shift into the little ring. So to get around this problem, you just need to pre-select your gears before you really need them. So what I mean is, don't wait till you're grinding to a halt up a climb before you try and shift from your big ring to your little ring. Think ahead, shift in advance, and just take a bit of pressure off the pedals when you do try and shift, and that will help things no end. Now your front indexing is working perfectly, you also need to make sure that your rear indexing is dialed as well. So to do that, watch the video up there explaining exactly how to do it. But if you are in need of a change of cables to get your front dialed, then why not watch the video down there about how to change your cables. Finally, so you don't miss another GCN video about maintaining your bike, click on me and subscribe.